Devastation lies just beyond the horizon. Sometimes it creeps to our shores, and other times it ignites in a blaze of misfortune. Disaster will happen. It is as tragic as it is inevitable. The day will come when we will have to endure the worst. However, we can prepare for that day. We can plan, we can train, and we can ultimately save lives.
The Office of Emergency Preparedness, in the purest sense, is to help to provide resources, equipment, and training to emergency responders within our area of response, whether it be the parish, state, or on the federal level. We're here to support the first responders, whether that be by training, by providing equipment and resources, or by being able to give them the information that's needed to be able to do their job better.
As the coordinating agency for Livingston Parish, it's our responsibility to make sure that everyone is educated in the proper procedures and ways that this office operates and Livingston Parish as a whole.
In our Emergency Operations Center, we have a series of cubicles that are established with computers and phones and support equipment such as paper and pens and all that are needed. We have one designated for just about every emergency response entity on a parish or state level that we might be dealing with in an event. Part of my responsibility in this office is to notify the particular stakeholders that may be needed to respond.
Each chair inside the Emergency Operations Center has a particular function, and each chair is designated to a particular function, which also can be called a particular department. That function may be the Governor's Office of Homeland Security has a seat inside that room. The Fire Service has a seat inside that room, and you'll have Red Cross, Health and Hospitals. They all have a role to play inside that room. That way, in the end, you'll have a collective, like a brain center inside that room where everybody has a say and everybody can speak professionally from every field. And they're able to bring all their assets and resources to the table so that everyone can accomplish the same goal at one time.
Now, there will be, in a large event, you will have a operations, which will be your forward command. They're the people that are feet on the ground right in the area physically looking at the incident occur. Then you would have a unified command, which is where all your different entities, your fire, police, medical, would report, and that could be remote. It could be, miles away. Then finally you would have the Emergency Operations Center, which would act as the clearinghouse or the funnel focus for all this information to be transferred in and out. And it very much acts as a central command post. And we don't mean to sound overly melodramatic about it, but this could conceivably be the last stand of parish government during an extreme emergency.
Livingston Parish's operations of emergency preparedness can implement a variety of training operations to prepare the parish's first responders. But in this case, the organization has chosen to perform an extensive tabletop exercise.
The way I've set it up and designed it is a little bit different from some of the other tabletops that maybe you participated on, because I've got some functionality involved with communications and also with the groups that we're working with. This is a working exercise. We're going to work in real time. As it goes through the time, everything we do is on real time here. When you communicate, any communication that's done should start with, this is an exercise, this is an exercise. Radio, cell phone, face-to-face. Make sure all your communications is clear.
A tabletop exercise is an exercise designed to test the readiness and preparedness for first response agencies in a parish, a jurisdiction, or a specific agency itself, designed to look at their current plans, identify the gaps, and then go back and tell them where those are. And then what we do is we come back in the tabletop and we tell them how to fix those gaps in a lessons learned and a corrective action plan. The tabletop's also used as a stepping stone for other exercises to prepare you for a functional or a full-scale exercise.
It gives us the opportunity to create an event that doesn't actually exist or hasn't happened, but does have the potential for happening. And it allows us to be able to position all the equipment, the manpower, and test how this response would take place, so that if we do see a problem, we can reevaluate or change our strategy and tactics up a little bit without actually having to put people in place. It's a lot more compact. It allows us to bring people in, and again, it's a cost-saving and time-saving issue. It could be something as simple as placing a street map on a desk or on top of a table, and everyone gathering around and saying, if we had an accident in this area, how would we respond? What roads would we close off? Where would we bring our ambulances in? In effect, that's why it's called a tabletop. It allowed people to get on, look at it from a static view. If they saw a problem, they could rearrange it. And it gave them an opportunity to work out strategy and tactics that they needed for being able to respond to an event a lot more quickly.
I've participated in other tabletops before through other classes, but this is the first tabletop of this size that Livingston Parish has ever done with so many agencies involved. Other agencies may do tabletops, but it's just particular to that agency. So you may have a fire department does a tabletop as part of their training program, but it's just fire related. In this tabletop, we were able to have everyone involved, fire, police, all types of the coroner's office, DPW, all these agencies having to work together and learning their other response protocols.
If you'll open your exercise manual in the back communications, there's a list of questions behind the exercise, which we'll start with. Communications, all I want you to address is those first two questions initially. Don't read ahead. Look at those. Everybody can see what those questions are that we're asking. But I'm asking each agency to take a look at this time, when this information starts coming in, what are your roles, what are your responsibilities, and what the hell are you thinking? Worst case scenario. Always plan on worst case scenario. Let's go over the exercises. I told you we're going to be dealing with the 3 C's: command, control, and coordination. We're going to look at roles and responsibilities of the agencies, timely decision making with a realistic approach. You're not going to have unlimited resources. You're going to be limited early on. There is some point in the exercise where you're going to have too many resources. You've got to determine when that is and how to address the situation as it goes on.
I thoroughly enjoy doing tabletops. This tabletop has prepared me because I'm constantly taking notes of things that I can do better. Every single event that we do, we may stand up or do a partial activation of our EOC for the smallest winter storm or tropical depression coming through, but it's always a good learning tool for me personally because I know I should have done this, I need to do this sooner or do this better next time. I learned so many things, especially with our operations inside of the EOC, because this was the first time that we had so many people, so we're still working out the flow of information, how it should be transferred in the inside the EOC. So dealing with our web EOC, we found some problems of reporting information and who needs to get it. So that's why we need to do these, is that we can fix those problems and everyone be aware of the fixes before we have another Hurricane Gustav or Katrina and it's just complete chaos inside of there, because it doesn't take long, and even with everyone knowing what they should be doing, it will still be chaotic. So if there's no set procedures on how to share information and whose roles and responsibilities, it's just a nightmare.
Number 1, the questions will go in 45-minute segments, 4 at a time. When I ask those questions, you've got 45 minutes to come up with your answers, whether you're in Unified Command, On-Scene Command, or in the EOC. So you've got basically a timeline. The reason I do that is because as adults, we procrastinate. Here, you're not going to have time to procrastinate. If you start going ahead, I'm going to throw problems at you that's going to cause your questions to not be good. So I'll know. Okay, do not read ahead in the questions. Make sure you understand and deal with the problems that face you, and I want solutions, not I don't know, I'll get back with you. Okay, I got plenty of problems, I need some solutions.
The tabletop that we just did was basically a functional tabletop, because we did some communication things with the radios, because we had some specific areas that we wanted to address for this particular parish. And in Livingston Parish, one of the things that me and Mark had talked about was that we need to make sure that with the tabletop that this works, so that when we test it during the functional, we'll know what direction with communications we want to go. Because instead of going ahead and putting a catastrophic failure in communications in the tabletop, we'll wait to make sure how everything works, and then later on we'll be able to test the communications part that we want in that functional, that full-scale exercise.
Which we actually came in and created scenarios. We had videos made, we had PowerPoint presentations and such made, scripts made for the people to follow, so that it added to the realism and added to the stress factor in what we were doing.
Bystanders are running out of the area. They're complaining of burning eyes, skin, shortness of breath. Okay? One bystander says it was a pipeline explosion. Another bystander says he saw an aircraft low flying, that it was having engine trouble and it crashed. So you got multiple stories going on. Now the cell phones are starting to ring. 911, you're getting several calls. You're ramping up as the calls start to come in.
We have to think in the worst case scenario. You know, this particular instance that you talked about, we dealt with a commercial air carrier, a cargo plane that crashed into a subdivision. You know, that is something that there's not a high probability of. It could conceivably happen, but we practice on worst case scenarios so that if the situation is not quite so severe, we know that we have more than enough equipment, resources, and manpower to do what needs to be done.
The design was because we wanted to test 3 areas. The areas we wanted to test are covered under the Department of Homeland Security's Target Capabilities List. These are minimal level requirements that you've got to achieve before a certain time period to meet NIMS requirements. We chose those areas and felt like by using the air transportation cargo incident, hazardous materials, and fires that we got the maximum response from the agencies, and we also got the wow factor.
All right, what I need you guys to do is come up with a plan of attack. These are the structures that are on fire. This is a floating fuel fire in the ditch here, going 2 ways. These are the structures that are currently on fire and what we need to address in that situation, okay? I'll leave that up there. Y'all come in with an initial plan of attack.
I normally take a tabletop depending on the size of the jurisdiction and the type of tabletop that they want to do. If you can give me 90 days, I can put you together a really good tabletop exercise. The key to a good tabletop exercise is making sure it's realistic and using the local flavor. A lot of times, and one of the problems I had in working the exercises with Department of Homeland Security was they were unrealistic. They're too large for what you're trying to do. And when you make them that big, it's not believable to the participants, so therefore they don't participate.
There were probably 4 to 5 weeks of planning that went into this. And you got to understand, this is not, we don't just take a dart and throw against a map and say, okay, we're going to have an incident there. We went into the details of what fire departments would be responding. In this case, we had 3 different fire districts responding. Where would they be responding from? How were they going to be getting there? What time of day it was to make sure that traffic flow would not be unusually heavy. How the victims would be able to get out. What lessons could be learned from an incident or accident taking place in that particular area. And from there, we started building the scenario. It's real easy when doing a tabletop to make it a no-win situation where, you know, everybody dies and everything gets burned up or so forth. But how do you learn from that? You know, we want to make it where if the people do right, the responders do what needs to be done, they have the equipment, the resources, and the manpower to do it, they're going to succeed. But we also want to find where there are areas that need to be improved upon and help guide those responders in that direction.
Simple phone call. 911 Parish Office is receiving several calls on an explosion in the Meadows subdivision with multiple structures on fire. Think about that for a second. Now, with your agency, what does that mean to you if you hear that information? You don't get a call, but someone calls on a cell phone, one of your workers, and says, hey, did you hear about the fire and explosion? I want you to start thinking about, as your agency, what you're going to be involved in that situation. Next one, please.
When you talk about doing a tabletop, everyone kind of has a tendency at the very beginning to take it lightly. Certainly, this is something we want it to be as realistic as possible when we create this event, so that you know, everyone takes it serious. As the event began to develop and as we began to start the event, I saw that everyone really, it was a stressful situation for them. You know, after talking to people afterward, they were very appreciative, they enjoyed it, but they realized that it was so easy to get caught up in the event because we had saturated them with sights, sounds, information coming in to the point that they really felt like it was real. And that was important to us because it helped them to see how they're going to work in a stressful situation, and it pointed out any areas that needed to be corrected or changed.
One of the things I found interesting about this particular tabletop was that the experience with so many people inside the operations center and all working together, it became very realistic, and you could really sense the pressure. You start thinking about, what do I do next? But when you have a room full of folks and from every walk of profession, and they're all putting their knowledge together in that unified command system, it's a little bit of a panic moment at the beginning, but I think the cool collective of everybody kind of brought it all together and made it all work. I think if you were fewer people or by yourself, it would be a little bit of a panic.
My role with the tabletop that this office just hosted was incident commander for inside the Emergency Operations Center. And basically, once the Emergency Operations Center was stood up, I would be in control of everything that happened inside of the EOC. So my experience with that, in that position as IC, was the first time that much responsibility had been handed to me. We've activated the EOC several times before, but getting to, from that point of view, was very interesting. The EOC wasn't really tasked as much as it needed to be, but we knew that going into it. This was a learning tool for all the agencies to show them that this Emergency Operations Center is a great coordinating center for everyone. So there was a lot of stress involved, but I think it was a good eye-opener for everybody to come in and see how the EOC should work.
Being that we were dealing with so many state agencies, from outside of the parish, which is what a normal situation would call for, it was interesting to see those folks come in into a new facility and to have everything waiting for them, the right tools, and still have everything in front of them that they needed, but still be kind of perplexed as to what's next because of the curveballs that a tabletop exercise provides. It was a little interesting to see some professionals come in and still be flustered on what to do next. When we were asked to multitask and I branched over into the public information side, we were having to write the release of to the public of what was going on. So drafting a public service announcement was a little stressful because we didn't know what information to provide and what information to not provide. And we were trying to do it in a way that was both informative to the public and didn't cause panic. And that was a little stressful because it was something that we don't normally do, but part of the tabletop exercise was to push those boundaries of what you don't normally do to see how you would handle it.
The Livingston Parish Operations Center is in a full-scale activation at this time. If you have any questions, please visit the Livingston Parish Emergency Operation website at www.preparelivingston.org.
Has invited agencies from all over local parish and state municipalities to participate in a mock drill. This is basically a disaster that we are simulating, where we allow the first response teams to come in and evaluate their actions and their emergency response plans to make sure that they don't need to modify or change anything. Practice where there's no emergency, they can kind of play devil's advocate and play different ideas out and different scenarios out to see how they're going to work, so that they're better able to work together, better able to provide services to the public when it's needed.
I'm a little vocal in concern with the incident to catch that urgency, because once you capture that urgency, it's going to die after a while. But in this case, it stayed around for about 2 hours, because as I was going in and out of the rooms and talking to the different agencies about what was going on and looking at what they were doing, we noticed several things immediately that we needed to correct. Not that we did correct it during the exercise, but after the exercise, we sat down with each agency and went over exactly what we felt like should happen. Here's what we did. Here's what we need to do. This is what we're going to do next time.
It can be taxing because you're trying to coordinate so many different agencies and so many different responses, and you want to see everyone do well, but the focus of this is not for everyone to do perfect. We want people to make mistakes. We want to find where the shortfalls or the shortcomings in our response are so that we can correct that. That's the whole idea behind it. We don't want to wait until an incident occurs to find that we don't have enough fire trucks, or we don't have enough protective equipment, or we don't have enough medicines available to treat people. We want to test in these type scenarios so that we can prepare for that in the future.
I didn't know anything about the scenario because I was a participant. Other people in the office did because they were planning it, but me personally, since I was going to be running the EOC, I wasn't made aware of anything. And it was just interesting to see that even though we have so many agencies in there, everybody's still doing their own little thing and not communicating even with someone across the room. So, but it's a learning experience for everybody. We've never had that type of cohesion before, to where everybody, you can just stand up and say, hey, can you get this for me across the room, or dial an extension. These agencies are used to having to do that by themselves. So
this parish is not used to the organized approach to a disaster, and as we go along, I think this is going to be very beneficial to the people of this parish and the region, based on the fact that we're trying to be very proactive and have things taken care of before they happen. And training is probably the area where we need the most help. Changing the mindset of folks going out there and working in smaller groups, moving in the direction of working in one large group in unison to accomplish one primary goal.
One of the things that Mark mentioned to me early on was that this parish hasn't done exercises in a long time. So that's why we took the crawl, walk, run approach with that, giving everybody the idea to get their sea legs and the ability to do that. And also try to help them with the areas that they need help in, and make sure that we can correct those things before we move forward and put any more on them. Because we want them to be successful. We just want them to be successful the right way. The strengths are pretty much always going to be the fact that these groups work together all the time. When I'm talking about strengths of your first responders, you're talking about fire, law enforcement, EMS, they pretty much work together all the time. But when you start throwing public works, public health, and emergency management in there, it's a mindset, and it's going to have to be a cultural change to where you can involve the EOC in this incident. You need to use the EOC in this incident. You need to understand how that communications is going to flow. You need to know who is in that EOC that you can call and contact. How are you going to communicate them? You need to build redundancy in your communications. You need to also make sure the people that are in those positions are trained. That's one of the critical components that when you look at an incident, that a lot of times, especially in parishes within Louisiana, folks are in positions that they're not trained to be in, but because that's the position they're in and that's where they delegated it on the box, that's where they go. And that's what we're trying to keep from happening in Livingston Parish. We want to make sure that if you're in that box, you're qualified to be in that box.
Masters of Disasters at Livingston Parish Office of Homeland Security and Emergency Preparedness, I thought you guys did a great job with this exercises and the things that were thrown at you. Had a lot of questions, a lot of things that had to answer in a hurry, but I got all the information that I need to create off of that. Obviously, you've done this enough, you're familiar with it. We wanted you to have a situation which you were comfortable in, but we didn't want you to have to reach outside your jurisdiction for resources. So we want you to be able to handle, to test what we had in that situation.
After we've seen that we've reached all the first responders in the parish on a tabletop level, we're going to move up to the next step. The next step is to provide a functional drill. And a functional drill simply is we provide another scenario that they respond, but instead of doing this in a tabletop in a classroom environment, they'll actually go out to the scene and practice one portion of this emergency. When I say one portion, I mean we might want to focus on evacuations of a subdivision, or traffic control within, into and out of an area, or a specific piece of firefighting equipment, how it would work and how they would apply it to that incident. And we'll start doing these functional drills. We'll again have the opportunity to go throughout the parish, giving everyone an opportunity to participate. Then in about 1.5 to 2 years from now, we're going to culminate with a full-scale exercise. And basically, you've probably seen these before. It's an incident where we will actually have people made up to look like they're injured. We will actually have some type of event where there may be a large loss of life or maybe large injuries. We'll have ambulances literally transporting them to hospitals in the area. They will participate, and it's part of the testing and drill process that they have to go through to be able to handle mass influx of injured people. We may have, a large amount of fire. There may be any number of different problems that have to be addressed so that the people are actually doing hands-on work. That's very expensive, that's very lengthy, and it takes quite a bit of time to set one of those up. So we've given ourselves about 1.5 to 2 years to try to develop for that.